Oh, everybody's all logged in? Okay, I think we're ready to go. We do have to-
It's you, honey.
Good evening. We are going to call this study session to order. We're calling the study session to order. If you're planning to participate, come on in and join the crowd. City clerk or interim city clerk, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Vice Mayor Watanabe, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a study session to discuss a downtown precise plan. There, as you will see, that there are two council members, the mayor and Councilmember Mahan will not be participating as a result of them owning property within 500 feet of the downtown, so they, as a result, need to recuse themselves. There being no other order of business, I will turn this over to Assistant City Manager Manuel Pineda.
Uh, Thank you very much. If I can have the presentation, please. Great. Good evening, Vice Mayor, members of the council, member of the public. Pleasure to be here tonight to discuss the downtown precise plan process with you. After tonight, we would like to move forward in the selection of a consultant team and also start the community engagement process. I do want to highlight that tonight is really a first step, and there will be many additional future community meetings as well as council meetings as we actually start developing the precise plan. So from an agenda perspective, I will be doing the background and recent action slides and just give you a brief summary of that. And then I'll pass it over to Andrew Crabtree, who will discuss the actual request for proposals. That's really the process for us to start hiring a consultant, selecting a consultant, and moving forward with the plan. The community engagement, which is a huge part of this process, and the next steps related to it. From a background perspective, I'm not going to go through all the bullets here. I think it's just important to highlight that we have done some work in the past related to the downtown. Of course, there's the general plan, and that includes our downtown as part of it. There is a 2007 downtown plan that was endorsed by council, and in 2010, the downtown committee was established. Over the last couple of years, also staff in the community have been working on the downtown super block project vision and objectives. Now, this plan you've seen before, it was not a council-approved plan, although it was presented to the downtown committee. And I think one of the key points that came out of this plan, even though it's not council-approved, was the idea of restoring the grid streets, and some recent council actions were related to that. In addition to that, the community has been very engaged as part of this process. And while we don't have a land use plan yet, or preferred land use plan, and this is what this process will be for, the idea of reconstructing the grid system has also been a key component that we heard from many community members as part of this process. So the previous plan, our city vision, latest vision included that, and the community vision also aligned with that as well. So with that in mind, there's been a couple of actions that the council has taken over the last 6 months or so to really start moving the process forward. If you remember, I was talking to you on the Prometheus option agreement to purchase roadway easements on Franklin Street and Washington Street within their property to really start that multi-year process to restore the grid street. And that was a small section of it, but a very important section and one of the key components of restoring the street system. And also, as part of the budget process, the City Council showed their commitment to a precise plan and included in the approved budget, approved funding to start the precise plan, and that's what we're going to start this process to select a consultant with that funding. So generally, the scope related to the precise plan will include, will guide the new development through policies, guidelines, and illustrations. And just a high-level overview, one of the key things we want to look at is financial feasibility. And what that means, it's many things, but two key components. One is that we do have some existing uses out there, privately owned, successful, and we want to understand from a financial perspective, what would it take for those private property owners to redevelop their properties? In addition to that, there are some, we heard different things about infrastructure that might be needed as part of a downtown. I think the grid street that we discussed before is a key part of that. We want to understand the cost of those needs and wants and kind of what those might be, and how does that relate to financial feasibility of redevelopment. So that's a key component that also helps inform what the land use options might be, because we want to make sure that we have a land use that's going to be constructible and that people are going to stand behind and are going to move forward with. Of course, when you have land use, connectivity and circulation, meaning transportation, is a key part of that. That includes new streets, includes things like the design. We want to make sure that it accommodates all modes of transportation, as well as, since this is downtown, are there specific monuments or signage that want to be taken into account to highlight its location. And of course, ultimately, the appropriate design standards for buildings, streets, and open space, so we all agree on what the future design should look like. From a boundary perspective, the precise plan we're proposing will be bounded by Benton, Monroe, Lafayette, and Homestead, and you see the map in front of you as part of the presentation. It's approximately 21 acres. Most of them, as I mentioned, are privately owned properties, and those are the ones in that light blue color, about 15 acres. And it's complex because there are multiple property owners. And in addition to that, it's really a mix of older and newer low, mid-density development. So there's not one size fits all out there. We have housing, we have retail, we have commercial. So it's quite a mix, different property owners, different uses, different ages, and different levels of success. Now, one of the key and exciting things for us is that we do have about 6 acres of city-owned property. And the fact that we own property in the area that ultimately the council and the city will determine what they would like to see could help facilitate redevelopment in the downtown. Currently, what we have, and we're all familiar with it, is we have some older strip mall development, lots of parking, and as well as an office building. So that's a great opportunity. But that also has some constraints. And this slide's not new to you, but I thought it was important to highlight as we move forward, as a reminder that even though we own property, that property does have some constraints. Property 1, which is about 1.3 acres, is currently leased, and that lease runs till 2021. And property 2, which is about 3.8 acres, is also leased and runs till 2022. So its limits about near term. Of course, we do have the time for the precise plan and everything else related to it. Additional item that I want to highlight on those 2 properties is, if you remember, as part of the Prometheus option agreement, we do have to provide replacement parking until they redevelop their site. So it's approximately 37 spaces that we will have to accommodate within our property. Property 3 is a little more complicated. It's about 1.1 acres. And what makes it a little more constrained is that as part of that parking lot, which serves the courthouse, the city is required to provide 112 parking spaces contiguous to the courthouse property if we decide to redevelop that parcel. So what that means, and there's no expiration for that. We talked about the cost of parking. If we wanted to do surface parking, it's about $30,000 a space. Structural parking, about $60,000 a space. And that's another key component of financial feasibility. For example, if you wanted to redevelop that property 3, how does that replacement parking fit into it, and how does it all work together? So with that, I'll pass it over to Andrew to talk a little more detail about the RFP and also the community engagement process.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Crabtree.
Good evening. Thank you, Vice Mayor, members of Council. The next step would be an issuance of a request for proposals, or RFP, for a consultant team to assist us with the planning effort. And as you can see, the items that would be covered under the scope of that RFP or mirror the scope that was just discussed with you. And we would be really asking for a consultant team to help us with the community engagement process. That's a high priority to make sure that we have a good engagement with the community, lots of opportunities for input. Another key component is the market demand analysis, that we want to really understand what is feasible, what's needed in terms of a land use plan to actually sort of incentivize and spur the redevelopment and achievement of the vision that the community brings forth. Consultant would also help us with preparing the land use plan documents, the connectivity analysis, environmental review that's required, and development of a RFP for the city-owned properties when we're ready to take those forward. This is the sort of the time frame for the RFP process and selection of a consultant. We release the RFP. We generally give about 3 weeks for a consultant team to respond. So it's open. We have a list of interested parties historically, but it's really open to anyone who, out there who is interested in being a part of our team. Can submit a proposal. Consultant teams usually include land use experts, economists, different types of specialities in that proposal. Once we receive those, we have about a 2 to 3 week internal review period where we sift through them, score them, and then decide who gets to advance to an interview. The number of firms that we can interview could be 3 to 6, or typically depends sort of on who rises to the top in that initial screening. And then once a consultant is selected, we go through a process of negotiating contract and really fine-tuning the scope of work, and then bringing that contract to the City Council, which we would anticipate somewhere in February or March of 2019. So also going to talk to a bit more about the community engagement process and what our thoughts are on how that would be structured. We really want to make sure it's a good process, that there's a lot of opportunities to engage with the public. Online tools are an important way, an economical way to reach a lot of people, and also to get a variety of people engaged through surveys and other opportunities online. We're proposing we would have, as we typically do, a technical advisory committee that brings in often other government officials or people like that, where there's a need to coordinate, just making sure that all of the sort of technical aspects of preparing a plan are addressed. And then a key, sort of at the heart of this, is a downtown community task force, members of the community, stakeholders that really will help guide the process. But that's also, just on the last bullet point, tied to public workshops. We will make sure that the community is broadly represented. Those meetings that the downtown community task force would have would also be public, of course, and so whether one is a member of that task force or not, there certainly will be opportunities to provide input and participate in the process. And then in terms of property owners and developers, we're really looking at that as sort of a second separate stakeholder group that we would engage with, whether to get input or keep them informed. In this particular case, too, there's a need to sort of anyone who might be interested in being part of the development would need to be kept partitioned away from the planning process, so there's no potential conflict of interest for that. So the composition of the downtown community task force, with proposing it to be approximately 7 members. They would really be an advisory body. We always work towards forming as much common ground and consensus as we can in this kind of group, where everyone listens to each other's point of view and sort of represents sort of the heart of where the community is in the vision. And it would really be focused on the preparation of the precise plan. It's not an ongoing body, but it's really something where you're asking people to commit to being part of it as we prepare the plan process. And then ultimately, as said here, they provide high-level direction on plan concepts at key points. You really set the vision, and then we also test specifics of how we're going to work out that vision with this group, get their recommendations on key policies. And then also, as mentioned on the slide too, they can help us as a filter of the community input and help us to understand how best to incorporate that input into the plan. In terms of the membership of the task force, sort of different key stakeholders that we've identified, the university, Old Quad Residents Association, Reclaiming Our Downtown, business owner, residents, and then a resident from outside of the downtown area as well. So with that, next steps, as mentioned, would be the release of the RFP, consultant selection process, establishing the technical advisory committee, selecting the downtown community task force, ultimately coming back to the council for consideration of the contract, and then starting the community engagement process formally in the early part of next year. And just want to mention as well that it's our intent certainly to have more study sessions with the council in the future.
Is that it?
That's it. We're available for questions.
Okay. Council, let me see. I don't have any. Okay, Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. So the task force members, will there be an opportunity for members of the community? I mean, obviously, some of the things like, Santa Clara U will select their representative, of the BIA would select their representative, but for a couple of the other more open slots, will we accept like nominations or applications for those, or is the staff going to recommend who should be in those positions?
So where we can, ask a body like the Old Quad Residents Association or Santa Clara University to identify on their own a participant, I think that would be our preferred approach, to let those groups sort of self-identify who best represents them for this process. And then for sort of a community member at large, we'll work through some of our other established groups and come up with someone. Staff will identify someone that we think is appropriately representative of the community, and of course, all that council has sort of final say that we'll be bringing forward specifically.
Another question. So I know Urban Field had done a lot of work on the initial phase. I don't know, I'm just curious, do they also do things like specific plans, or would they be, I know they would have to submit a proposal, but are they even in the running? Since they had a lot of they already have background now.
Right. They certainly could be a proposal. They've contacted us and already expressed early interest. I think they would need to build their team a little bit more to cover some of the different technical aspects that we're looking for in consultant. They're a fairly small shop, but they could be a part of that process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Neill. Councilmember Davis?
I just want to hear from everybody.
Okay, Councilmember Kolstad, do you have anything that you'd like to say? Now, just to add on to putting the task force together, I looked at the list, and two other groups that actually three, I wondered about asking to participate is having a representative from the school district, because we do have, a couple of schools, in proximity to the downtown, and also maybe possibly a representative from the Historical Landmark Commission or the Architectural Review Commission. I thought maybe some of our commissioners might like to be a part of this as well. So those were just some thoughts that I had. If there's nothing, excuse me, Assistant.
Thank you. Yeah,
Manager.
as we're hearing feedback and perspective on the task force, I do want to highlight that one of our goals is to keep the group around that 7, 8,
Right.
9 member, just because from a management perspective and making sure that we can come back with good feedback and recommendations to council. A group of that size would make it more productive from that end. So if you're looking at adding some or maybe reducing some, maybe give us a perspective on kind of what the ultimate group might be that the council might be interested in, that we bring forward for your consideration.
Yeah, no, I heard that and I respect that, and but just thinking, when I saw this list, I thought maybe there were a couple of other opportunities. So just throwing that out there in case we don't hear from any of the other groups, but I doubt that will happen. So if there is nothing else here on the dais, we do have some speaker cards. And so everybody has 2 minutes. And if you haven't turned in a card already, please fill out a card and give it in to our city clerk, so you'll have an opportunity to speak and share. The first 2 speakers I have are Anna Vargas Smith and Frank Lemon.
Good evening.
Good evening, Anna. Welcome.
Welcome. Let me just get started here. I'm sorry. Very exciting night tonight.
Yes.
I'm ready to get, sorry.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Anna Vargas Smith from Reclaiming Our Downtown. I'm one of several speakers tonight. We're really excited about the first study session. It's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of historical project, and glad that we're targeting the next steps towards a precise master plan, task force, and the release of the RFP. Special thanks to the city for the great support throughout this entire process. As you know, Reclaiming Our Downtown is a passionate and resourceful group, and we've grown from 4 to 3,300 in just 2 years. But the benefit of such a large base is basically having some resources to create community engagement and also research teams. So clearly there's a lot of momentum about our downtown, and our community engagement research groups continue to reach out and survey all citywide, different neighborhoods. In fact, we targeted 6 districts. And we'll continue to do so to support the project. We've made tons of attempts at chats, major city events, groups like Rotary, Chamber, schools, superintendent, school boards, Mission College, Santa Clara University. We've talked to them all. We're all about alignment. But for the sake of time, I just wanted to highlight our methodology and that our key questions that we ask. Our sample size, typically for a population of 125,000 approximately, to achieve a 99% confidence rate, plus or minus 4%, is about 1,025 citizens. So far, we've spoken to 1,600. We asked them a simple question like, what are your priorities here? Is it El Camino? Is it related? Is it historic? 80% said historic downtown. We asked them if they wanted the original footprint. 87% said yes. We asked them what they want in their downtown. It was restaurants, sidewalk cafes, ice cream shops, festivals, and a theater. Again, I just wanted to reiterate that our group has resources, and if you need more community engagement, we're here to help support the project in every way possible. If you need more complete report on the results of the survey, that's continuing to outgoing, ask us. We'll give you a copy of it. Again, thank you for everything you're doing in making this dream a reality. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for all you're doing, Anna, and the Reclaiming Our Downtown, and I'm sure one of you will take one of those spots on the task force.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Frank. And then if Skip Pearson would like to line up, and Patty Allman behind Skip. Good
Thank
evening,
you.
welcome.
Good evening, council members and city staff. I'm Frank Lemon. I'm here to share a statement from the Reclaiming Our Downtown group. One of our team's charters has been to meet and speak with national urban planners and managers who have executed successful plans. All have included the community task force approach and emphasized its importance. Rod is pleased that Deanna, Manuel, and supporting staff have recognized the importance of the community task force, as this approach has been a common theme. The first keyword shared with us was manageability. The task force should be no more than 12 people, and I think we heard that mentioned. Another keyword was community. Our great city now has 6 different districts. We have conducted surveys in each district and found that the responses to be nearly identical to the overall average, with that 87% of citizens polled want a significant downtown return to the heart of the city. And they want a say in it. Reclaiming Our Downtown respectfully asks that at least 4 task force members come from separate districts, and that the quad be one of these districts. We also respectfully advocate the following: city planning and management leadership. We are pleased to have creative and open-minded individuals such as Manuel, Andrew, and Suds, and advocate for their participation. A representative of the current landowners should also be at the table. We want to include one of the current merchants, one representative of SCU leadership, one student from SCU's student body, a representative for affordable housing, such as Pilar Lorenza of Silicon Valley at Home. And after these 2 years, Rod itself would like a seat at the table. With the urban planner participating as an advisor, this will equate to 12 solid team members who will represent Santa Clara's interests effectively. We want to thank every member for your efforts and support towards establishing the task force with the goal of producing a precise plan for a great downtown. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. Okay, Skip Pearson, and then Patty Allman.
Hello, council members. I'm a property owner in the Old Quad, and my perspective is kind of coming from that direction. I joined recently Rod, the movement to reclaim our downtown, and Rod has had a research team for the last year getting advice from the top urban planners throughout the United States that have been highly successful in revitalizing their downtowns, including historic Fort Worth, Texas, West Hartford, Connecticut, and locally Mountain View, Redwood City, and Livermore. Donna, in the last row, has all that information that's been accumulated on all the various cities. The response from all of the urban planners has been extremely enthusiastic because Santa Clara is the center of Silicon Valley. It's also the 49er home. It's the home of Santa Clara University. And more interestingly, from an urban planner standpoint, they feel that they feel that Santa Clara is the only city that they can recall to ever completely demolish its downtown during urban renewal. And therefore they feel we have a blank canvas, a golden opportunity, a once-in-a-life opportunity to get things right. All of the planners emphasized how important it is for the downtown precise plan to be orchestrated with the surrounding area. The flow of people and traffic in and out of downtown, especially downtown, must be choreographed with the university and the train station and the residential areas to ensure the old quad's charm and quality of life is maintained. Thank you.
Okay, Patty Allman, and then Donna West and Mary Grizzle. Welcome, Patty.
Thank you, Council. Wanted to make sure that you have the downtown of Livermore map. We're using this for a comparison to our downtown.
Thank you.
Okay, Livermore addresses the surrounding areas in its downtown task force plan. So the darkest area is the downtown core. The transit gateway area is like our train station area. The boulevard gateway areas is like our Lafayette area. And the north-south residential areas are like the north-south quad areas, as you can see on this map. So Livermore has a great downtown, and we just wanted to make that comparison for future reference.
Thank you. Thank you for that information. Okay, Donna, and then Mary Grizzle and Jim Crouch behind Mary. Welcome, Donna.
Hi. Good evening. Good to see everyone. Vice Mayor, City Council, City staff. And I just want to tell you that we have been doing research of these downtown case studies and have access that we can give and share with you of the urban planners who have been responsible for the master plans for revitalizations across the U.S. And some of the cities we have are Penn Plaza, New York, historic Annapolis, Maryland, I made it, Liberty Harbor, New Jersey, Potomac Shores, Virginia, West Hartford, Connecticut, Vail, Colorado, historic Fort Worth, and some local revitalizations are the Santa Lucia Preserve in Carmel, downtown Livermore, Mountain View, and Redwood City, and Public Market, Emeryville, and Bay Meadows. So each of these downtowns is with a community task force, urban planner, financial analyst to create the precise plan to include all areas of the neighborhoods. We feel that this protects and preserves the neighborhoods around the 8-block square that we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. That's very good information, and I know you are doing a lot of research. I see your work on the Reclaiming Our Downtown Facebook page, so thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, Mary Grizzle, and then Jim Crouch. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, and I'm in front of you, and I want to thank you, heartfelt thank you, for including all of the property in the precise plan, all of the property in the 8-block grid. However, I believe that the only way that the precise plan can work and be most effective and in building a viable downtown is also to include the old quad, the library, the depot, and all of Franklin Street to the monastery. We need to make sure that all of these surrounding areas will be maintained as gateways to the downtown, and we need to protect them with the precise plan so that these areas will maintain the same quality of life that they have now, i.e. the kids playing in the streets without heavy traffic and et cetera. A protection on what is built in these areas so that they are in conformity with our downtown or vice versa, a downtown that fits with the surrounding area. In listening and reading success stories of downtowns that have become great successes after being rebuilt, I feel choosing a great task force, which is inclusive of the six districts, will have the best results, and what we, Reclaiming Our Downtown, are seeking for ours. We want a downtown with a wow factor and have the capability of seeing firsthand all of the successes and failures of those that have been rebuilt in the Silicon Valley alone. We can eliminate their mistakes and give it the wow factor. Just think how this city council would feel when it becomes a reality and the mistakes made of 55 years ago were wiped clean and our downtown makes history. Think about the party we'll have.
I agree with you, Mary. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Okay, Jim Crouch, and then
I will
Bob Emerson.
pass.
Okay, Jim. Okay, I will take you off my list. Then we will go to Bob Emerson and then Suds Jane. Is Bob here? Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Emerson. Suds Jane, would you like to come forward?
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. I attended, as did many of you, SCU's very successful ribbon cutting for the opening of the Franklin Street Pedestrian Mall. This is really the next step in the progress on Franklin Street. What I ask is that a representative from SPUR, which focuses on downtowns and urban centers, be on the committee or the task force. One thought that I had was to show the power or the attractiveness of this downtown would be to have some food truck nights on the parcels that we own, the parking areas, just to pull the community together and show the power of having a place to go in Santa Clara. Then as we think about the consultant, maybe the consultant's scope should be slightly expanded to think of where else in the city we could have some mini downtowns, other places where people don't all have to drive to this downtown to go out, because we're going to have a parking congestion problem. And finally, we should find some way, because there doesn't seem to be really any restaurants in Santa Clara that provide live music, but some way to really encourage the restaurants that will come to this area to have live music. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are all very good ideas. Thank you. The last speaker card that I have turned in is from Adam Thompson. And if anybody else would like to speak, please feel free to fill out a card. Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and council members and city staff. Thank you. So I guess I'm mostly concerned a little bit by the process that was kind of laid forth this evening. I know the city has done this multiple times in the past. 2007 being the last one where we had a full site-specific plan for the downtown, and it never got realized. So I think, being on a couple other committees, CAC and also the downtown kind of outreach, I think that the urban planner or the consultant that we've had has been, on both occasions, a little bit more lackluster with the community, and it's kind of more telling us about what we should be doing instead of getting the input and the community kind of leading the charge. I'd really like to see the task force get set up prior to the RFP going out, so that way that the task force would have some input and understand the dynamic that they're going to be in for the long haul to put the plan together. I think it would give a lot of benefit that way, so that way the feel of the relationship between the consultant and the community and the task force would be stronger, I think. And I think it's great. I mean, it's, you know, I also want to know why the other ones kind of failed. If somebody can kind of, like, was the dynamic set up incorrectly? Was the money not there? Did we not have the resources? I think it would be really interesting and very important to know why it wasn't successful in the past, so that way we don't make the same pitfall and spend all this money on consultants and it kind of just goes into nowhere. The last thing is, we talked about financial analysis. I think it would be great knowing that we've had this great economic boom for the last, 8 years, not 10 years. I think it'd be really good to make sure we look at it both folds. What can we do during a boom and what can we do during a bust? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. That is the last speaker card. Would anybody else like to come forward and speak that hasn't turned in a card? This is your opportunity. Nobody? Okay. Coming back to the council, anybody that wanted to speak that didn't speak? Councilmember Davis?
Thank you. I took a lot of notes, and I talked to Manuel earlier about how the task force would work, especially having the number of people between 7 and 9, and you brought up some other options. One of the 6 districts, because that was something I didn't think of, but Santa Clara University, the Old Quad, Reclaiming Downtown, Downtown Business Owner, I don't know if you've thought about who that all could be. We don't really want to direct that. We want you to choose who will come to that. And I think when I talked to Manuel, that we thought that would be better for you to make that decision as to how you wanted the task force to go. Adam, you brought up a good point. We've had a consultant in the past, Frank Fuller, and Teresa did allude to the fact that some things were good and some things were not good or clear. So I especially like the idea of having the task force have input into the RFP so that everybody has just not control the whole thing, but a nice analysis of how that would look and what the scope would be and how far down the path that's going to go. So that would be my vote on that. I mean, I know we're just kind of thinking about this as a directive tonight, but that's where I think I like staff to go, is to let you decide. They work with you, and then how to figure out to get that RFP in the proper way, that it does incorporate the specific plan along with anything else that goes with that. All stakeholders engaged and not disengaged. Suds brought up Spur. I'm not totally sold on that one. I think I'm more into what we've already staff recommended. But those are just my thoughts. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember.
Vice Mayor, if I just a couple of comments on that. So, yeah, so from a staff perspective, certainly what we would like, working with Old Quad and Reclaiming Outdoor Town and Santa Clara University would be for them to propose who they think the right representative is from their group. We'd look from your leadership to be able to guide that direction. As it relates to some of the other ones, we're still kind of working through a process as to how we're going to outreach to people to see what the interest levels are, and also that the couple of new ones that were added, as well as put some thought into what the community said today to see if there's any additional modifications to it. Regarding the RFP and the kind of task force input, I would say we can take that back and think about it. One thing that it does affect significantly would be, of course, the schedule, because if we are waiting, if we have a process where the task force has input into the RFP before we release it, then that schedule we provided for you certainly would change. It would add months to the process. I do want to highlight that the RFP, it's really a process where we're selecting the most qualified consultant, and there's still going to be additional decision points along the way, especially as it relates to bringing the contract to council, that's specifically going to say this is the scope of what they're going to cover. And at that point, we should have some of the task force members already in place, and we can go over that scope in more detail and see if there's any elements that they think are being missed or need to be added. And then, if we can always, it can be for council consideration. Of course, anytime we add something, there's a cost associated with it. But certainly, if the council has a perspective that they would like the RFP to wait until we have a task force in place and find a way for them to do input, I do want to make sure that everybody's aware that my guess would be, and Andrew and I haven't thought about this, but probably add at least another 3 months or so before we're back to council, with 3 to 4 months before we're council with a contract. The other option is we go out with RFP, select the most qualified consultant to do that work, and I was finalizing the contract, we can kind of go into more detail with the task force as to what that contract is to see if there's any elements that they think are missing or need to be beefed up or anything else like that. So both are options, and I would be interested to hear the council perspective on it.
So with that being said, if Adam and the other people can get this together in a timely fashion with you, would that be easier to get this RP together? I mean,
yeah, I would say, and if Andrew wants to add to this as well, that certainly I think the groups like Santa Clara University, Old Quad Residents, and Reclaiming Our Downtown probably can get back to us pretty quickly. I think the rest of the effort if we are going to have task force involvement in development of the RFP, I want to make sure that it's the full task force, not just some members of the task force. So we would have to figure out what that is, and we would first we would require the council to go through us with who the council, approve who the task force members are, make sure we provide you good guidelines as to what their responsibility is going to be. And once that's done, at that point, we would start looking at RFPs and what their involvement would be to that. And we would try to provide guidance to you on what we think that should be as part of their selection process.
okay, Ryan.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make a suggestion. I've handled a lot of RFPs in my career, and there's a lot of different ways you can do it. And one thing we might consider is sometimes a city will post a draft RFP before they actually issue the RFP, and they'll get comment, and you can get comment from prospective proposers on it. You can get, is this realistic? And you can also get comment from the public. So that's another avenue we might take a look at, because I've found that with RFPs, if you have too much of like a committee kind of going through things that they're not really familiar with in terms of selection process and things like that, then it can really slow the process down. And I think I hear a lot of urgency for getting the consultant on board and getting them actually working. So I think there's pluses and minuses to involving the task force with the actual issuance of the RFP as opposed to working directly with the consultant once we're starting to form the contract. So we'll take a look on a staff level as to what we can do, and we could test the waters and just simply put the RFP out there as a draft and let people say what they think, including all members of the public, not just task force members.
No, I was going to also add, I mean, just based on some of the comments made by some of the speakers, I mean, there's a lot of data. They've collected a lot of data themselves that, they know what, the residents, what the community is looking for that, may not be a part of, what an urban planner or a possible urban planner might be looking at. So I think it would be a good idea to have, some task force members definitely be either a part of the process or if you put the RFP out there to see what's on the list, for them to be able to review and give some input just in case they don't see something that they've heard that would be a good thing to have on there. Councilmember O'Neill.
Well, okay, or Andrew, well, I'll let Andrew go first and then I'll make some.
I just came up in case there were any more questions.
Oh, okay, so what I was going to say was that most of the RFP will be fairly kind of technical in nature and, kind of describing the phases. So I'm thinking, that because, Mary made some comments about the scope, and I've kind of thought a little bit about that too, and I know there's some of us who have have had some conversations about the whole station, the station when it was, 12 years ago or whatever, VTA, Santa Clara and San Jose did a station area plan, which really hasn't been being followed very much, but to look at, do we want to change a little bit of the scope, and if that's really pretty much what the concern is in being involved with the RFP, because I would assume most of the RFPs that I've seen, they'll have all the legalistic stuff, and then it'll talk about kind of like schedule, the kind of things that Andrew and Manuel laid out in terms of how many, what kind of meetings we're talking about, and what the original the process that we're going to use to get to the goal, and perhaps some of the financial things, and so that's I'm thinking is the real, would the interest from the community largely be in discussing the scope And, we've been talking about the 8-block area, but there, there does have to be the acknowledgement of, particularly the
Whole area.
the issues with, say, the stadium, stadium, that's later, the station.
Yeah, and from when we're looking at the scope and, as we're looking at the A-block area, that's really kind of what we look at the land use component of it, where we're going to look at what the land uses are going to be, looking at the grid streets and everything else. Certainly, kind of how that land use relates to the adjacent neighborhoods would be something that the consultant would have to look like. And as it relates to transportation and access, we usually want to look at corridors of where people are coming into that downtown. Of course, the station would be part of that. So our focus was, from a land use perspective, that 21 acres, yes, 21 acres is really where we're looking for a land use consultant and a financial consultant to kind of help us decide what could work there and kind of what the community input's going to be, what the council direction's going to be. But there's other elements, and how it relates to adjacent neighborhoods will be part of that, and how people, the whole connectivity part of it, it extends beyond those blocks, but how you're bringing people in from the adjacent neighborhoods. So we would anticipate that would be part of the scope. That helps with some clarity.
Anything else?
No, it's just one more. Okay.
Councilmember Davis.
So, just with how organized they are, I mean, that's why I thought we could probably do it fast with getting the task force together for the RP. Because they seem to have, I mean, I took a lot of notes, and they're organized. They're very organized. I think they can come up with this list of task force quick. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to work that out with staff. So that was just my last comment.
Yeah, and I think we're hearing from council that there's interest of finding participation for the task force as part of the RFP release. So we will have to take that back and think of as to what that, how that means and how that works. I just wanted to make sure I highlighted, because we did put a schedule up there based on doing this parallel track process that said, we would be here for a contract consideration with you in a February-March timeframe. That as we're looking at this, of course, that's going to add time, and certainly the council ultimately will make the final consideration on the task force. So we would have to get that done before we start considering putting an RFP out. Yeah. Yeah, so that's fine, as long as we all understand, especially when we put a graphic with the schedule. I want to make sure that that people understand that there's going to be changes to that, and we'll go back and take a look at see what the options might be that work best.
Thank you. I have a question. I know there's an Old Quad community meeting coming up, the overlay community meeting. Will that have any impact or bearing on this at all, or help in any way?
So the focus of those meetings have really been on the zoning code update process and how we can address some of the concerns of the old quad that we've been dealing with a long time, but through the zoning code update process. So it wasn't our intent to really use that as a forum to discuss this separate specific plan.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Colstead, anything? No. No, I just wanted to add, I had attended, I was in San Mateo and Redwood City last week, and actually was had a nice tour of the downtown, and actually talked to one of the planners there, talked to us about how they had put a precise plan together, and they had looked into a streetcar, and they got grant funding to help them look into adding the Broadway streetcar, I guess it's called, adding it into the downtown. So I think we're very lucky that even just around us, there are a lot of cities that are adding their downtowns back into their communities, and so I think there's a lot to learn from. And then on Friday, I had the good fortune to attend an urban planning workshop for all day Friday, and actually learned a lot that we're probably going to be discussing and looking at, in terms of, what kind of buildings are we going to put in, in terms of housing and also retail, to make sure that, that we're planning for the future of our downtown to make it sustainable. So there's a lot of really good ideas out there and ways to look at planning a downtown that will, make us a sustainable, but also make sure that we put the right parts in there to make sure that it's definitely going to be what, our downtown wants. So from talking to some of the planners last week, there are a lot of good people out there with ideas, and so I think this is going to be a really exciting time, and I think this is the right time for this to happen. So it didn't work in the past, but I have a feeling it's going to work now, because it seems like all the pieces of the puzzle are coming together at the right time to make this happen. So thank you to everybody for all of your input and continued input, and keep working hard and collecting data, and we'll see what happens. You'll be announcing them when when you have a response for the RFP? City,
So our next step is going to take the comments back related to how we can incorporate the task force community input into the RFP. We're going to go back and take a look at some of those options, and then we'll communicate back to the council as to what we think that the next steps will be. So the announcement of the RFP is probably not quite coming out yet, since we want to see what those options are, and we'll kind of go from there.
And do you need any motions or direction from us?
No motion.
Okay, well then we will conclude this study session and look forward to the updates, and we will see you back here in a couple of minutes for the 7 o'clock council meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks for coming.